Battlezone, released for the Atari 2600 in 1983, is one of the most iconic arcade-to-console conversions from the early 80s. Originally created by Atari for arcade machines in 1980, Battlezone was a revolutionary game at the time, offering a first-person perspective in a tank combat setting. The Atari 2600 version retains much of the original's appeal, despite the limitations of the console. In Battlezone, players take control of a tank in a 3D-like environment where they must fend off enemy tanks, virtual tanks, and other military threats. The core gameplay revolves around strategic movement, shooting enemies, and avoiding incoming fire. The challenge increases as the enemies become more aggressive and numerous, which is a hallmark of arcade classics. While the Atari 2600's hardware cannot fully replicate the depth of the arcade version's vector graphics and 3D effect, the game does a remarkable job of capturing the essence. The tanks and environment are rendered with simple, yet effective, blocky visuals. The use of a pseudo-3D perspective is quite impressive for its time, and while it may look dated by today's standards, it still has a certain charm. The graphics on the Atari 2600 are quite rudimentary, with blocky tanks and a minimalistic background, but the game's use of perspective and color gives a sense of depth that was cutting edge for its era. The monochrome-like visuals, paired with the occasional flashes of color, manage to convey the feeling of an open battlefield, even if the game's visual fidelity falls short of the arcade version. The sound design, like many Atari games, is basic but effective. The bleeps and boops signal enemy actions, tank movement, and shooting. While it's not a standout in terms of music or sound effects, it does enough to enhance the experience without becoming a distraction. The controls in Battlezone are simple, as expected from the Atari 2600, but this doesn't detract from the gameplay. Players use the joystick to move the tank and fire shots, which is intuitive and responsive. The addition of the difficulty switch allows players to tailor the experience to their preferences, with more aggressive enemies on higher difficulty levels. One of the greatest strengths of Battlezone is its replay value. The game is simple at first glance, but the increasing difficulty and the need for strategic thinking make it a game that you'll keep coming back to. It's the type of game where mastering it requires practice and precision, and with each session, you can improve your performance and see how long you can last against the relentless enemy waves. While the Atari 2600 version of Battlezone may not have the flashy graphics or sophisticated gameplay of modern games, it's an excellent example of what can be done with limited hardware. It takes the heart of the arcade classic and compresses it into a format that works for the home console, offering players a fun, challenging, and engaging experience. For fans of retro gaming, or those looking to experience one of the pioneering games of the 1980s, Battlezone for the Atari 2600 is worth checking out.